to Calgary Olympic Vote, Decision 2026. Here's your hosts, Joe McFarland and Rob Breakenridge on 770 CHQR.
Well, greetings and salutations, our friends. Yes, it is plebiscite day. Rob, we've been waiting a long time for this, haven't we? It feels like forever.
There's been so much invested in all of this, both in terms of hours, tears, money, emotion, you name it. I mean, certainly it is a city divided going into today. One side looking to keep the dream alive, another looking to bring the madness to an end. So very polarizing positions on this question of whether Calgary should host the 2026 Winter Olympics. And the question put to voters today was very straightforward. You were either for it or against it. And we will know probably within an hour which way Calgary voted and then where we go from here.
It's going to be a very fascinating evening, and it's already starting to develop in the social media front in particular. And our own Blake Law with Global News here has been tweeting out some of the numbers regarding what the scrutineers have been sending out. And these numbers are unofficial at the moment, but it's certainly leaning in the early stages towards a no side right at the moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too. I mean, based on the numbers they're posting down at No headquarters, it was more lopsided for no, actually, in the advance vote. A little bit closer today. Obviously, there was a full week of campaigning and advertising and door knocking and all of that in between. But yeah, and it's interesting because normally in an election, Joe, we'll all have our web pages, our browsers open, and we'll have the City of Calgary website or the Elections Alberta website, and you keep hitting refresh, and you're getting numbers as they're coming in. The city's not doing it that way this time. Their plan is to release all of the results all at once in terms of this side got this percentage, this side got that percentage. In terms of, specific word-by-word breakdown, we're going to get that in the coming days. So we'll get an announcement from the city. But in the meantime, obviously, votes are being counted. And like in other elections, at least the note side anyway, they have a lot of scrutineers watching the vote count and keeping tabs on the vote count. So that's what makes these unofficial numbers. This is coming via their scrutineers. But the numbers they're posting at this point, after about 77,000 votes, 63 to 36, more or less, lead for the no side. So that's 77,000 votes. The city's saying over 200,000 people voted. So obviously there's still a way to go. These are unofficial results, but a little bit of an indication early on as to maybe where things are at in the early going.
Absolutely. And throughout the course of the next hour or so, as we head towards the results being announced officially, we're going to go kind of around the horn in a sense and go to the different headquarters that have been set up through the course of the evening, including the yes side, the no side, the Bidco, and results headquarters as well. And we're going to start off this round the horn with our own, as mentioned, Blake Law, who is at the no headquarters this evening. Blake, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Good evening.
What is sort of the sentiment that you are getting in the early stages here as the numbers are starting to kind of come in from the scrutineers?
Yeah, absolutely. As these unofficial numbers start trickling in and they're being counted by the no camp, there's definitely a sense of excitement here. People really feeling like they're in a good position, at least from the no perspective. I'm looking at the board right now. They have 17 polls from today's vote, polling stations from today's vote that their scrutineers have so far reported, plus all the advance vote. So that comes out to over 77,000 votes that they've had reported to them. And the no camp, considering all of those votes, they're at 63.4%, according to these unofficial numbers reported from scrutineers. So over the past hour or so, when they started getting a few of these numbers, a few people were visibly excited, some hugs, some high fives, but of course they do understand that there is still a whole lot of votes yet to count, but they're feeling pretty good right now.
So what kind of a crowd are you seeing down there tonight?
Well, we're at 1918 Tap and Table here in Kensington, and I was honestly a little surprised earlier in the night. We were down here at 5 o'clock, and it was just two people here from the No Calgary Olympics camp, but it has steadily increased. We got basically half the restaurant to the no camp here. And we're seeing people from, there's been more than just the one no Calgary Olympics campaign. There's been a couple different separate groups, but they're all here together. The Alberta chapter of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is here. A couple other taxpayer advocacy groups are here as well, and some people who just have been supportive of the no campaign and from the public who just wanted to be here to watch the results kind of trickle in.
Global's Blake Law joining us from the no headquarters. We'll check back in with you a little bit later on. Thanks for the update there, Blake.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Let's keep going. Yeah, let's keep going around the horn here and check in with Aurelio Perri, who is at the Yes headquarters. Aurelio, thanks for joining us here.
Hey there, Joe.
What's the atmosphere in your neck of the woods like?
There's a lot of conversation going on. Had about 80 people, but it's certainly picked up in the last 10, 15 minutes. I would say there's close to 200 people here right now. Got a couple of members from City Council here. We've got Greg Clark from the Alberta Party is here. Kent Hare is here, and former Finance Minister for the province, Jim Dinning, is also in attendance here, as well as you've got a number of former Olympic athletes who are here to support the bid. One difference here versus where Blake is, there's no results being reported to people. We did get the media people did get a heads up saying, hey, the advance poll, don't read too much into the advance poll results. We were going to get creamed in the advance poll, was the comment that we got from people here in the Yes side.
Well, it's interesting. And certainly the numbers we see suggest that it was a little more lopsided in the advanced polling, so maybe there's something to that. But the Yes side, I guess, Aurelio, they've decided not to devote any resources to scrutineers. So they're not down there watching the vote count, as we understand it.
I think they do have somebody has people there because they are getting results here sent to them. Jokingly, somebody said, hey, we won the polls at the Foothills Hospital and Peter Lougheed Hospital. So they are getting results from some places. They're waiting until there's more of an indication before they talk about what's happening. We were supposed to already have some comments here from Katrina LeMay Doan. That hasn't happened. People just milling about as we speak. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of former Olympians in the crowd here as well.
Aurelio Perri is our man on the scene at the Yes headquarters this evening. Aurelio, thanks for this. We'll check back in with you a little later on.
You bet.
So there's just a little bit of the snapshot that we'll be providing you throughout the course of the evening. Also still to come here, Lauren Pullen is at Results headquarters, Jamie Dahl at Bidco headquarters as well. So we'll try to check in with those two as well through the course of the evening. And we'll give you a little bit more, I guess, context heading into how we got here, I think is maybe an interesting question that we will all have to kind of wrap our heads around maybe once the dust settles on the results.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been talking about this for more than 2 years now. When the idea was first floated at City Hall that maybe we should be in the running for 2026. Maybe we should take a closer look at this. And of course, we went through the bid exploration committee, going about creating the bid corporation, the wrangling over whether there would be a plebiscite, and of course, what turned into November 13th. Plebiscite and what's been a hotly contested Olympic plebiscite, and we are very close to knowing the results. And I mean, it obviously starts a new chapter in this debate. Obviously, it could be the closing chapter, or it could be the end of the beginning, and moving on to trying to be the selected city, negotiating with the IOC. If it is yes, there's a long way to go, but even here still tonight, we got a ways to go. One
of the things, too, when you mentioned a couple of years ago, even when you go back to the thoughts around Sochi, and there was some discussion at one point that Calgary could potentially be a backup if the Sochi games didn't go off as well as they did. Because there was a lot of questions about the infrastructure in place and that kind of thing. And I remember talking to a couple of people saying, hey, we could do it if the IOC asked. And I wonder if that maybe got some people thinking, maybe which kickstarted the discussion heading into what has become today, plebiscite day. We're going to take a quick break here on the Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. You're listening to 770 CHQR. You're also tuning in live on Facebook Live.
This is Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. Now, here is Rob Breakenridge and Joe McFarland on 770 CHQR.
It's plebiscite day in Calgary, a crucial decision on whether to move forward with a bid for the 2026 Winter Olympics. The polls, of course, closed at 8 o'clock this evening. The city set to announce official results sometime around 10 o'clock. We're told we do have unofficial results trickling in via the scrutineers that the No side has had at a number of polling stations today, and we'll watch as those unfold. It's interesting, Joe, because if you look back at recent games history, at least in the international context, history tends to favor the No side. There have been a number of communities going back even to Vancouver in the 2010 Winter Olympics where plebiscites have been held asking residents if they want to vote. The tendency has been no. We had Sion, Switzerland vote no regarding the 2026 Winter Olympics. So too did Graubünden in Sweden. We had two cities in Austria drop out. Innsbruck, which of course once held the Winter Olympics, voted no in a plebiscite. Graz was about to have a plebiscite. They decided to cancel the bid before it got to that. Hamburg, Germany voted 52% against hosting the 2024 Summer Olympics. Munich, Germany voted 52% against going after the 2022 Winter Olympics. Yeah, Davos in Switzerland, also 52% no vote for the 2022 Winter Games. Oslo, Norway, interestingly, they voted 55% in favor of pursuing a bid for the 2022 Winter Olympics. They later dropped out of the running. Vancouver, of course, voted 64% in favor of a bid on the 2010 Winter Olympics, ultimately was successful in winning that bid. Bern, Switzerland, interestingly enough, voted 78% against going after the 2010 Winter Olympics. So that was the strongest result of all of these plebiscites. Interestingly enough, the only city that has been awarded the games only to reject them was Denver. Denver was awarded the 1976 Winter Olympics. They had a referendum after being awarded the games. 60% voted against financing the games that ended up going to Innsbruck, Austria. So an interesting history when it comes to the support in these kinds of plebiscites, referendums on whether to host a Winter Olympics. Now, I had a chance yesterday to speak with economist Andrew Zimbalist, who's authored a few books on the Olympics, including his book Circus Maximus. And given what's happened in recent years, I asked him how worried the IOC is about what's going on in Calgary and with the other potential 2026 host cities.
Dropped out of the bidding for that. And then the Summer Olympics for 2024 and 2028 were awarded at the same time because IOC was clearly worried that if they didn't do it at the same time, they would award the games to Paris and then LA would drop out for 2028 and they would have nobody at all to host the Summer Games in 2028. And now you guys are in the middle of this vortex of three cities, each of which seems to be on the verge of dropping out. The city council in Stockholm, as you said, has already said they don't want it. And that seems to be definitive. Somehow the IOC says they're still in the race. A few days ago, Thomas Bach, clearly anxious about the vote tomorrow in Calgary and clearly anxious about the fact that the federal government in Canada won't put up enough money to meet the budget. This became news last week or the week before. Very anxious about it. Thomas Bach makes a proclamation that he really likes the bid that's coming out of Milan and Cortina. But of course, again, as you pointed out properly, the central government, the federal government in Italy says that they don't want the games and they're not going to provide any financing for it. So clearly, they're at the edge of the precipice right now, the IOC. If there's a no vote tomorrow in Calgary, they might not have anybody coming to the party. And their whole model, as it has existed historically, is a model where they say 7 years before the summer or the winter games, they say, okay, cities of the world, come and tell us and convince us that you're the most worthy of all the cities. And they get the cities bidding against each other, and you get more and more elaborate bids. But that process, which the IOC has depended upon, is no longer functioning. I think it's very interesting, the position that Calgary is in now. If they do vote yes tomorrow, and if you can figure out the financing with the federal government, then I think you have a lot of leverage.
Bold prediction for you, Rob.
All right, let's hear it.
If Calgary votes yes today, I believe that somebody is going to bring up the idea of holding a referendum after Calgary potentially gets the bid. I can see someone bringing that. As soon as you said that about Denver in 76, I had no idea about that, but that's totally something I can see Calgary doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of interesting twists and turns still, because again, remember, Oslo was another city voted yes. They were perhaps the front runner for the 2022 Winter Olympics, and the city decided that it was just the costs were getting out of control. There were a lot of concerns about where things were going, so they dropped out, and the IOC was down to just 2 cities to select from for 2022, and of course, it was awarded to Beijing, China.
Let's go around the horn again here and bring in Lauren Pullen from Global News. She's at the results headquarters at the EOC tonight. Lauren, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
What is the, I don't expect there to be much of an atmosphere there, but what is happening at the EOC tonight?
Well, right now we're just hanging out, waiting until they figure out the AV equipment to be able to put stuff up on the screen for us. So, it's really just a couple media here waiting for that official press release results. We've been told that as soon as Laura Kennedy steps on the stage here to give the official yes or the official no, that an email will be sent out, the tweets will be sent out, and everything will happen all in one go.
Is it sort of the mind that everything is on track? And it sounded as though even when hearing from Laura Kennedy earlier today, there was a lot of sense of, hey, there's been no hiccups or major hiccups at this rate, so everything should go on track for that 10 o'clock release time?
Yeah, and I did inquire about that just because we were told also that if you line up by 8 o'clock, you still can vote. Like the polls won't just magically close at that 8 p.m. marker if you are in line. And I asked about that too. I was like, if there was a larger lineup, is that going to push back this 10 o'clock announcement? And they do anticipate that 2 hours is enough buffer room, especially, of course, with these new tabulators where a lot of the unofficial numbers are actually coming in, right? So they're hoping that 10 o'clock timeline is pretty accurate, but of course it's a game of wait and see. It's already, 9:30, so...
So they'll be giving a heads up to everybody that the results are coming. We'll know a little bit in advance exactly when it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I asked for a 15-minute heads up, so should be sooner rather than later. We're expecting to know more of an exact time pretty quickly here.
Global's Lauren Pullen joining us from the Emergency Operations Center. Thanks so much for Lauren. We'll check back in with you a little later on.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right, when we come back, we'll get some thoughts from political analyst Duane Bratt on the campaign, what stood out to him about the messaging from both sides and kind of where we're at going into this vote and where we go coming out of it. Rob Breakenridge, along with Joe McFarland, you're listening to live coverage of the Calgary Olympic vote decision 2026.
When I
had your say at the polls. Now have your say on the radio. This is Calgary Olympic Vote, Decision 2026. Hosted by Rob Breakenridge and Joe McFarland on 770 CHQR.
Are you for or are you against Calgary hosting the 2026 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games? That's what Calgarians had to answer today. You had one of two choices. I am for Calgary hosting. I am against Calgary hosting. And we are going to find out in about half an hour's time exactly what Calgarians decided.
Right. At this point, as we told earlier, we have the unofficial numbers coming via the scrutineers that the no side had at various polling stations. So at this point, only 18, and that would include the advance polling as well, does have the no side in the lead, at least according to these unofficial numbers, about 64 to 36%. But that's only about 80,000 votes counted. We're talking about over 200,000 votes cast in the plebiscite today. So still a ways to go, but some early indication maybe of where things might be leaning.
I have seen as well, like somebody commented earlier about the fact that this will be an interesting case study if the advance polls go one way and the day of polls go a completely other way. I don't know if it'll happen, but if it does turn out that way,
well, I mean, a week is a long time.
There's
right?
a lot of things that happened in last
Yep.
week for sure.
Yeah. And we even had Aurelio point out, I mean, the yes side was even saying, well, we thought we'd get our butts kicked in the advance polling. Mm-hmm. So, well, why did they think that then?
Well, and especially given what we learned later on in the week, even stuff like the McMahon Stadium retrofit, that kind of thing. So a lot of things happened in that week that may have turned the tide. I guess only time will tell. We welcome in Duane Bratt to the program. Duane, thanks for joining us.
Good evening, guys.
What do you take away from the last, I don't know, I feel like it's been forever, but the last couple of weeks in particular?
What a roller coaster. I mean, it was about 2 weeks today that it looked like the plebiscite was going to be canceled. It was an 11th hour deal with the federal government. There was a full day city council debate to reconsider, basically, which would have been canceling the plebiscite and canceling the bid. And a majority of councillors voted in favor of doing just that. But because it was a motion to reconsider, it required a 2/3 majority. They needed 10 votes. They only got 8. So we're going ahead with the plebiscite with a majority of councillors opposed to it 2 weeks ago. And I think that was right in the middle of advanced polling. So it does not surprise me that the advanced numbers are as big as they are for the no side. The yes side, which was much more organized, was much better funded, went on a massive advertising blitz over the last week, and we'll see if that makes a difference.
I wonder about the mayor's role. I mean, the other thing, I guess, that happened last week is that the mayor officially embraced the yes side, although I think to a lot of people, he was always kind of there. This seemed like an idea that he really pushed, a potential legacy project for him. Is the mayor very much linked, do you think, Duane, to
absolutely
the results?
He is. I think he wanted to stay above the fray, but I think the yes side's internal polling numbers showed that they were in a lot of trouble, and he came out and threw a Hail Mary and came out and really embraced it because in many respects he becomes the figurehead. There's lots of different politicians. One of the comments that I made on TV this evening was, where have the provincial politicians been? They committed money. They made sure there was a plebiscite, but nobody is campaigning yes or no. Even Jason Kenney put out a tweet today praising, Sean Chu and praising Premier Notley. So he's not taking a stand. Notley's not taking a stand. Even the feds have been a bit muted outside of perhaps Kent Hare. It's been city council that's really been out there.
And people might recall, I mean, Gordon Campbell in BC was a huge booster of the idea of Vancouver 2010.
Oh, absolutely. And he was front and center and campaigned actively in their plebiscite.
Does this prove to be maybe a case study, regardless of the decision, about how future councils need to deal with major issues like this? Do they need to come out with a more united front than this council did?
They didn't want a plebiscite. That was thrust upon them. City Council is divided. Regardless of whether there's a yes vote or a no vote tonight, Council is going to remain divided. And I think that's been one of the problems all along. You saw that in the debate where there was a disconnect between the Bidco and City Council. There was a dispute between the federal government and City Council, a dispute between the City Council and the Alberta government, and disputes within the council itself. So how can you put on a multi-billion-dollar project when you can't get on the same page? Compare that to Vancouver, where they were largely on the same page. Compare it to Calgary 88, where they were largely on the same page. That hasn't happened here.
Was it just a matter of not having that singular champion? As weird as it sounds, as someone or a group that could say, "Hey, this is what we should stand for."
Part of that, but I think the other is that the strength of the bid was refurbishing existing facilities. And the weakness of the bid was refurbishing existing facilities. So everyone was talking about, look at the legacy from 88, and there was a tremendous legacy from 88. Look at the legacy from Vancouver in 2010, and there has been a legacy in 2010. When people would say, well, what will be the legacy of 2026? It was, well, we'll get a mid-size arena that we're not quite sure we really need. We'll get a field house, which we need, but it includes an ice plant that we don't. It either includes or doesn't include a new Saddle Dome, depending on who you're talking to and when you're talking to them. There just didn't seem to be, we're going to spend all of this money without something that will last beyond 2026.
You know, the volatility, too, of the voting public was always a bit of a wild card. The municipal election last year didn't seem to really have a defining issue. Obviously, a plebiscite like this, by its very nature, has a defining issue. You got people that are anxious, that are worried about the direction Calgary's going, and it was never quite clear how that was going to manifest itself.
If this had occurred in 2014, in the economy of 2014, we're not having a plebiscite because it's a slam dunk. Yes, amongst all orders of government. But now, with the economic downturn, people are angry at governments, and this is a way of lashing out. I compared it to the Charlottetown referendum in '92, where Preston Manning and the Reform Party campaigned against Mulrooney's deal, just like members of the No side are campaigning against Nenshie's Olympics. And so it's easier to say no to this. And there's a lot of enthusiasm on the no side, where it seems the money and the organization is on the yes side.
MRU's Duane Bratt, thank you so much for the time, and looking forward to seeing what happens later on this evening.
Sounds good. Talk to you later, guys.
You betcha. Let's head on over to the phone lines, and at the Yes headquarters is Alberta Party MLA Greg Clark. Greg, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, great to be here.
You're at the Yes campaign, so I assume you're a yes for the Olympics 2026?
You know, I am. In the end, I got there. I wasn't very happy with the process, listening into Duane, and quite honestly, the sooner we can shove the politicians out of the way on this process, I think the better off we'll all be. But at the end of the day, I think that I got the yes talking to my constituents, who I think on balance are more yes than no. When I look at the deal, there's $1.5 billion that would come to Calgary from the federal government. We wouldn't see otherwise. There's a transfer payment of dollars that goes to, let's just say, other parts of the country most of the time. I think the province is a responsible bid, a responsible contribution. I think the city of Calgary's risk is managed by the fact that the money they'd be spending is money we need to spend anyway. So I think at the end of the day, this is a good deal for Calgary, and I think that you don't move forward by standing still.
It's interesting, Greg, because in not a lot of issues where you'd see some common ground between the Premier and the opposition leader, both Rachel Notley and Jason Kenney seem to have similar views on how the province should approach this and what the provincial role and contribution should be. Are you in line with that? Do you think what the province offered and the conditions attached to it were reasonable?
I think it's absolutely reasonable, and I really love the idea of the plebiscite right from the outset. This is a decision that has a far-ranging impact and a potential long-term impact, on the good and in terms of risk and challenge. It's a substantial financial commitment. I think in the end the benefits are there and the risks are manageable, but I think that's too big a decision to leave up to politicians. It's one of these generational type decisions. I don't think we need a referendum for everything. Something like this, Calgarians are going to have their say, and whatever the answer is, whether it's yes or whether it's no, I really hope everyone gets behind that and we move forward together to build our city and our province.
Alberta Party MLA Greg Clark joining us, and we just got word about 5 minutes ago that we are getting the 10-minute or 15-minute warning. So essentially 10 minutes left until we find out what that vote is. Greg, one final question for you here is, and Duane alluded to it, was sort of a lack of, I'll call it leadership from a provincial or federal government standpoint. Would you have liked to have seen them, just a one-word answer out of you, would you have liked to have seen the Notley government step up and be more definitive?
No. I actually think that we should have had a clear financial deal from the feds, in particular, the province and the city earlier, and let Calgarians decide based on the facts.
Greg Clark, thanks for the time, sir. You are listening to Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. He's Rob Breakenridge. I'm Joe McFarland. We'll be back in a second.
Big Breakenridge and Joe McFarland with 770 CHQR's radio special Calgary Olympic Vote, Decision 2026.
And we're inching closer to getting the results from the city of Calgary on the plebiscite today. The decision on the 2026 Winter Olympics probably now. We're facing maybe 5 or 6 minutes out from those results, and we will be going live to City Hall as they're announced. But in the meantime, let's check in with the No side, Erin Waite from No Calgary Olympics. Erin, good evening. How you feeling?
I'm fine. How are you?
Well, you know, we're as interested as everybody else. At least some early indications of a positive trend for the No side. What do you make of what you've seen so far?
It's hard to say because it is just a few of the polls, but it does seem that many Calgarians did have some concerns about hosting the Olympics.
If Calgarians do vote no, what is the next step in your mind?
I would love to see Calgarians come together and just get working on what we need to do. We know we've got issues with our downtown office space and, just shifting our city to where it needs to be and keep building on the livable city that we have. And so I'm looking forward to, participating with other Calgarians in those conversations and figuring out that direction and just getting on with it.
But if the vote goes yes, do you lay down your arms, as it were? Do you continue the fight? What would the response be?
No, absolutely. We just want Calgary to be successful. And so we will not, we wouldn't quibble with a yes vote and with continuing on for sure.
There's been an interesting dynamic that's emerged. Some people saying that the city's more divided than it's ever been before. And yet the mayor saying today he's actually seen us more come together in a sense because we're actually talking about some issues. Where do you stand on that debate?
We have had an excellent experience. We've been treated with respect. We've treated everybody else with respect through this whole process. And it's been truly delightful to have good conversations about what's important for Calgary. And I've found people to be very generous on both sides of the conversation.
It did seem like the no side was really, a David against a Goliath, the organization of the yes side, the resources of the yes side, the big corporations' resources. What do you think, if it is a strong showing, and it certainly appears to be for the no side, the takeaway lesson on, what a grassroots movement can achieve?
Well, we were simply focusing on information and sharing information, and people absorbed that information and used it however they needed to conclude for themselves. And so in that kind of grassroots sense, I think that's a healthy process. And, I think you need to consider both the emotional response plus good information and draw your own conclusions.
Erin Waite from No Calgary Olympics, thank you so much for the time and looking forward to seeing what happens in the next few minutes here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, our colleague Jamie Dahl at Global News tweeted just less than a minute ago, we are 3 minutes out from getting that announcement. So, like we said earlier, boy, I don't know, Joe. I got to admit, I was a little surprised in seeing some of the early results because I wasn't sure that that's how it's going to go. I'm still not convinced. But yeah, it's a real toss-up at this point. I don't know. How about you? I am expecting the unexpected, and I really don't know what to expect out of it, frankly. And it was interesting sending out a tweet earlier this evening saying that, hey, it seems as though we've got a little bit of an ageism issue here, is that everybody who is sort of under the age of 40 that happens to be in my social circles said, yeah, I'm voting yes. On the flip side, anybody over the age of 40 was more likely to vote no. And then as soon as I tweeted that, somebody else tweeted back saying, weirdly, it's been the opposite in my circles, where it's the younger people have no connection to 88, so they're more likely to vote no. And those who I've known
who were here in 88 wanted to go and wax nostalgic a little. So it makes me think this is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people maybe gave it credit for.
Yeah. Well, and we saw a poll this week, and we'll know in a few minutes how accurate that poll was. But what stood out to me, and it gets to your point, is that they had the demographic breakdown, and that the strongest showing for the no side in that poll was among the 18 to 34 demographic, which we've been told were the ones who would most be in favor of this. So, maybe that poll is tapped into something going on that kind of speaks to what you alluded to, or, maybe the poll's way off, and, maybe the yes side is right that young people are really jacked up about all of this. But did they get out and vote? The other thing, obviously, to watch for is, what the official turnout number is. But certainly, by all indications, there's a mandate either way here that it appears to have been a considerable turnout today.
Well, and that was the thing that amazed me right off the bat, was seeing that number as of 6 o'clock tonight was at about 200,000. Whereas in the municipal election, that number was right around 160, I think, 170. So there was certainly a lot more people who had, and as you mentioned, a vested interest, because this is a one and done kind of issue. All you have to do is say yes or no, or I guess in this case it's I'm for or I'm against. So it's really easy to get to. And again, I think both sides did a pretty good job of getting the vote out at the end of the day. There were people who were dug in from beginning to end, and they weren't going to duck at anything that came their way.
So any moment now, we'll be going live to City Hall. It'll be returning officer Laura Kennedy who will be making the announcement, and it will simply be the percentage, I believe, or maybe even the total vote number, but we'll get the overall city result. The ward-by-ward breakdown, that's going to come in the coming days. This is going to be a straight-up, did the city vote yes? Did the city vote no? So we'll hear Laura Kennedy be making that announcement. I believe the mayor is going to be speaking shortly after. So we'll hear first of all from Laura Kennedy, but I believe Mayor Nenshi is at City Hall, and he will be responding just after the results are announced. So that's our understanding of how this is all going to play out, and we are just standing by to go live to City Hall.
And it'll be interesting to see over the coming days the breakdown by riding or by ward, right? Because this is the other thing at the end of the day, is this is a non-binding plebiscite. So council, in theory, could say, well, you know what, Calgary, you voted no, but we're going to do it anyways. Or on the flip side, Calgary, you voted yes, but we still don't think it was a big enough majority to push forward with this.
Yeah.
And some councillors have said, listen, I'm going to vote with what my riding voted for, not necessarily what the entire city voted for. So there's a few more pegs that need to kind of be put into place before this is said and done, either for or against.
Well, as Nenshi said, and there was something to it. He said no means no and yes means maybe. Which, in a sense, look, I mean, if the vote is yes, that doesn't mean that, we can start planning Olympic parties. Obviously, the IOC has a decision to make. Even if they select Calgary, there's still a negotiation that would occur. So there may be still other opportunities if Calgary feels it's gone sideways or it's not working out as thought, that the plug could still be pulled. This is not going to be an announcement if it is a yes vote that, hey, the Olympics are coming. But certainly if it's a no vote tonight, that is the end of the road. I think with the provincial money, federal money being contingent on a yes vote, I think the city council would have no choice but to respect those results. But yeah, if it ends up being 50+1 either way, it's going to leave a lot of lingering doubts and resentment about whether that was the right way to go.
Just been told we're approaching the 15-minute mark, but I'm not sure if that means we're not quite there yet by the sounds of it.
Time moves slowly at City Hall. All right, well, we're told that Laura Kennedy, the returning officer, is at the podium. Is it a stage? Is it a podium? We can't see it from where we are. Whether we should be going to it live, we are still in a holding pattern. People have been complaining about the slow vote count. I'm going to complain about the slow walk to the podium.
I will point out, it'll be interesting to see how business community backs whatever decision is made, because what is really lacked in this bid that others have really seen, and Switzerland is one, Sweden, is it's very private business oriented. And that hasn't been the case here. hearing a little bit of talking. We're about getting close now. Returning Officer Laura Kennedy, now live with the announcement.
Okay.
Just one.
I know.
Two. No.
This is what happens as announcements are made live.
For those who don't know me, my name is Laura Kennedy. I am the returning officer for the City of Calgary. Tonight, the vote of the electors has been closed. All the voting stations have closed and the numbers are in. The results of the vote are, and I apologize, our technology in this office didn't work. The results of the vote are there was 304,774 ballots cast, 832 were cast for Calgary hosting, which is 43.6% of the vote. I am against Calgary hosting, 171,750 were cast, which is 56.4% of the vote. These results are unofficial. They are unofficial until we have completed all of our review of the results, or the elections review of the results. We will retest all the tabulators tomorrow to make sure they were operating as we originally set them up to work. The voter turnout, in this case, we only tell you the number of votes that were cast. There is a difference in the two numbers that were given to you of 192. Those were ballots that were cast that were either blank or overvotes. So that is the difference in those two sets of numbers. I'm very proud of what my team has delivered. We indicated we would have the results done by 10 o'clock. We were able to manage significant amount of voters coming through the voting station today. The extended hours, I think, was very successful. We will be doing debriefs and looking at all of our processes after this. But I just want to say thank you to citizens of Calgary for coming out and voting, and all of the vote workers for all of their support and continued civic duty of doing working our elections. So thank you.
So that was 43.6% yes, 56.4% no, right?
That would be correct.
Thanks. 304,774 ballots cast.
Exactly.
Okay.
Of which 192, which if you do up the math of those two numbers, we're short 192, but those were 192 ballots, of which there were either someone had overvoted or undervoted.
All right, we are listening to the live announcement from the city's returning officer, Laura Kennedy. And so there you have it, Joe, 56.4% on the no side, 43.6% for the yes side. I don't know if you describe that as a landslide necessarily, but I got to admit, I'm surprised. I thought it would be closer.
I thought it was going to be within 5%. Either way, like I thought it was going to be 55-45, somewhere inside of that realm. But it just goes to show that there was a very, I think, a strong enough vote against that no one in their right mind, I don't think, around that table at council will say, well, you know, this is good enough, right? I don't think anybody's going to be saying we're going to do this anyways.
Well, boy, oh boy, and you mentioned it earlier, you know, the soul searching that would be occurring. I mean, either way, but certainly if the yes side were to come up short, and they very much have tonight. So does the mayor wear this? Questions are going to be asked of the bid corporation, all kinds of Monday morning quarterbacking to occur here because, the no side really pulled it out. We just talked about it with Erin Waite. I mean, it seemed like, it was this little ragtag bunch of volunteers up against this well-oiled machine in the yes side, and Duane Bratt sort of, I don't know if he was intending it to be a prediction, but alluded to the 1992 Charlottetown referendum, where you kind of had the same thing, where the smaller, less organized, that side didn't have the resources, but they still pulled it out in that referendum. Something similar just occurred here. There's a couple of key points from this that really stick out to me. One is the IOC is going to have to do some soul searching, because here we are in friendly,
Yahoo Calgary, we went, nah, not interested. Do not pass go, do not collect $5.7 billion or whatever the dollar figure is.
Yeah.
So there is that side of it. The other side that I'm interested now in hearing is from those who said no. What's next? In terms of, okay, the big argument was we can spend the money on bigger and better things. Okay, what are those bigger and better things? What are the things that are going to make this city move forward? Because I got in a little bit of it wasn't even an argument, it was a discussion on Twitter about this earlier tonight, is there has been a very vocal no to everything crowd in everything from snow and ice removal to schools, which I realize are provincial, to a new arena, to everything, transit lines, everything. What are we saying yes to? And so that's going to be the discussion that we're going to have to figure out at some point down the line.
Well, Aurelio Perri is at the headquarters tonight, I guess, for the yes side. And Aurelio, what's the reaction?
It's subdued. There was some, like the announcement was basically made, we came up short, and that's about it. And then dwelling on we've learned so much. We've learned so much from this to use going forward as a city. You can see disappointment in faces. I don't see any. I can't see any openly tearful people, but I think we're going to see this bit of a group hug over there with some people. But for some, obviously, it's the end of a job that they had working with the Bidco, that type of thing. So that line of work now will dry up because $700 million from the province disappears, $1.4 billion from the feds disappears with a no vote. So as much as somebody might try some Hail Mary thing, I don't know how possibly they could revive this. This is now dead.
Is there a sense around the room, Aurelio, when they say we've learned so much? What exactly did they learn?
I think they're learning about, how to sell the city in the future, that type of thing, saying if we go out and bid for something else, not as grand as the Olympics, can we go bid for a bigger convention? What have we learned from this to use for economic development?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions asked, a lot of soul searching. Obviously the bid corporation, they felt that they had come up with something that obviously was enough to save the plebiscites. They really pitched their message hard in the closing days, but it all appears for naught. I think there's going to be a lot of parsing of this.
So they were saying the advance vote. Don't read too much in the advance vote. Well, you should have, because the advance votes were occurring when council was doing their inevitable council things that they do. A lot of people are saying council's the train wreck in all of this. And basically, I think people were just looking at council and just thinking, oh my God, if these guys are involved, how can we trust them?
Global's Aurelio Perri, our municipal affairs specialist. It's certainly going to be a busy time for you in the days and weeks ahead as City Council tries to wrap its head around this. Thanks for the time. We'll check back in with you a little later on.
Okay, no problem.
Well, and the other question that's going to come up, Joe, does this mean, the yes side kind of licks its wounds and starts laying the groundwork for 2030? But obviously.
Well, and isn't Salt Lake City, I think, because I think there's an American city potentially in the running already for that. The one thing, too, that I wonder about is whether or not you're going to start seeing FOIP requests coming towards the mayor's office and a few others. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And you are listening to Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. In case you're just tuning in, Calgarians have voted 56.4% against Calgary hosting the 2026 Olympics. I'm Joe McFarland. He's Rob Breakenridge. We'll be back in a second.
Decision 2026. Here's your hosts, Joe McFarland and Rob Breakenridge on 770 CHQR.
I am for Calgary hosting 132,832, which is 43.6% of the ballots cast. I am against Calgary hosting 171,750, which is 56.4% of the vote.
So there you have it. No side with 56.4% of the vote takes it. Calgary will not be forging ahead with the 2026 Olympic bid, barring some crazy decision by City Hall, I think.
Well, it looks like voter turnout's going to be somewhere right around the 40% mark, and I guess maybe you can argue that still 60% of eligible voters stayed home. But compared to recent municipal elections, that's actually pretty high. It's not close. We're not talking about a 51-49 kind of outcome where there's doubt or a recount or anything along those lines. I mean, it's. I don't want to call it a lopsided win for the no side, but it's, I think, a pretty definitive result. And already the bid corporation has put out a statement basically reflecting on all of this, thanking their supporters, and, for all intents and purposes, conceding defeat here. So in that sense, it is over.
So now the question, I think, turns to what's next for the grand vision of Calgary. And one person who gets to wear this is Mayor Naheed Nenshi. And a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks in particular surrounding council's handling of this file, the rigmarole surrounding they were against having the plebiscite go forward, but they didn't have enough votes to get around it. And everything sort of encapsulated this whole bid process was captured in that 2-day span where we went from it's not a good enough bid to, okay, this is definitely a good deal for Calgary. We're expecting to hear from Mayor Naheed Nenshi in a couple of minutes. 10:15 our time is what's expected. We will go to that live when he takes the podium.
Well, and it'd be interesting to hear what he has to say. And, as we've been talking about this evening, how much he wears this. Is this, was this in part a referendum on mayor, on city council? I mean, obviously, we just had a municipal election last year. Most of the incumbents were returned. All those who were on the ballot were returned. So it wasn't automatically clear that going into this, there would be that kind of volatility and people looking to send a message. But maybe we expected more over the past year in terms of an economic recovery, and the fact that City Council, or maybe the best they could come up with, was to dip back into that well of nostalgia and try to redo the magic of '88. Maybe that wasn't enough, and perhaps that's what this result today was.
I think the other thing, too, I'll call it broken promises, but right from the onset, the promise was Calgarians would have all the details in front of them considering going into a bid 30 days before. And we were learning about McMahon Stadium upgrades. We were learning about things right up until Friday night. And I think that rubbed people the wrong way. There was a lot of questions that were left in a lot of people's minds, and that was probably more than enough for people to go, I can't do it. There were more than enough people that were saying, I want to be for it, but this one just doesn't pass the smell test.
Well, and, still going forward, I mean, there are other questions around what we would call the sport or the winter sport category, whether the Flames and the city are going to get back to the table and come up with a new arena deal. And it was interesting, too, and I was doing an interview with one of our affiliate stations on the Chorus Network and asked about the new arena question, and it's been interesting to see because you hear it on both sides. I think there were Calgarians who were a little disappointed or underwhelmed that the hosting plan didn't include a new arena. People thought it would be maybe a shortcut to a new arena or a different way of getting there. I think on the yes side, some of them try to play it up that, even though there's not one in the plan, it will probably get one, and this will probably help to that end. So I think, there's going to be renewed focus on that, what that could mean for Victoria Park, what that could mean as as at least spurring further development in that part of the city? And are there still questions and conversations around, the winter sports infrastructure, those that would have been addressed by this Olympic plan, but what about others that wouldn't have? What about community rinks across the city, many of which are in dire need of repair?
The other thing, too, that has been sort of a massive issue, and we talked about this on the show on Monday, was this massive unfunded project known as the Field House. Yeah, it's been number one on the priority list for what feels like eons. And we now have no closure. We have no timeline in terms of when that could be built because it doesn't have any money attached to it. It's a much needed facility here. Is it back in the cards? Does the city kind of try to reallocate things so that they can kickstart that? Because as we were chatting with the gent from the multi-sport Field House Society yesterday, he said Edmonton's got 3 of those things. Calgary's a little behind there. Well, yeah, and so where does that rank on the priority list? And are there different ways of getting there? I mean, Lethbridge is in the process of building a pretty nice new field house. That was done in partnership with the province and the feds, the private sector. Is there still something like that would be in the offing for Calgary? But are we looking for it to address, well, what exactly? I mean, you have this weird situation for an Olympic bid where you'd have a rink in the field house, even though really it wasn't going to need a rink. That's not what we need. Is another sheet of ice necessarily. What is the sport that needs to be addressed by a field house? Is it track and field? Is it indoor soccer? Is it something else? So I think we need to figure out where that fits into what Calgary needs and where it ranks on the list of priorities. But yeah, I mean, these are the conversations now that result from a no vote. One of the conversations that has been had in the last few minutes, Aurelio Perri sat down with the Canadian Olympic Committee's Tricia Smith. Let's play that interview.
Your reaction to the vote results?
Well, obviously, we're disappointed. The potential here for Calgary to do things differently were just tremendous, and the people of Calgary really know how to do things. There was a different kind of Olympic model these days, and I was really looking forward to seeing how Calgary used that different model. But it's a democratic process, and we respect that and move on.
Why didn't that message that things were changing with the IOC, this was going to be different? Why didn't that message resonate, do you think?
I don't know. It wasn't until last week that we were able to really get the solid numbers out to the people, and I think that was really important to get that message out. So because people are justifiably concerned about costs always. Maybe the additional information on top of that, which would come once the foundation of the numbers were there, just wasn't heard. I talked to a lot of people on the street today, and everyone I talked to was very positive about the game. So I think the momentum did shift once the numbers came out. I had that. I can't say I was 99% in favor when I spoke to people on the Sea Line today.
Let's head on up to the stage where Mayor Naheed Nenshi is now addressing the media.
All right, I'm ready. UTV's ready. All ready?
Everyone rolling? Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for coming out here tonight. Clearly, I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping for a yes vote tonight, and I'm joined here by some of my colleagues, Councillor Jean-Carlo Carra, Councillor Jeff Davison, Councillor George Chahal, and I think all of us could have said, would say that we were all hoping for a yes vote tonight. But ultimately, the people have spoken in big numbers, and the people have spoken clearly. And this is very clear direction for where we go from here. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but before I get there, I have a whole bunch of people I want to thank. I want to thank everyone who has worked so hard on this process for so many years. All of the community volunteers on the Bid Exploration Committee, on the board of the Calgary 2026, the hardworking staff of Calgary 2026. I particularly want to thank the leadership, Scott Hutchison and Mary Moran. I don't think they've slept in months for the tremendous work that they did. And you know what? Every single one of those people did that work for one reason and one reason only, and that is because they love Calgary. And they love the future of this city, and they want to build a foundation for that future. I also want to thank the incredibly dedicated public servants who've been working on this. Here at the City of Calgary, led by City Manager Jeff Fielding, and particularly by the head of our City Secretariat, Glenda Cole, and her team. They have done work like I have never seen public servants do before on something they knew was fundamentally important for the city. So thank you to them. Thank you as well to our partners at the provincial and federal governments, particularly those public servants who really buckled down, tried to be creative and thoughtful in making this work. And finally, thank you to our partners at the Canadian Olympic Committee and at the International Olympic Committee for believing in this bid from the very beginning. You know, a lot of folks have said that this has been a divisive conversation for Calgary. And I got to tell you, I reject that thinking. Because what we had was passionate people talking about the future of the community and talking about what they believe in. And I think that's a tremendous thing. And I got to tell you, despite some of the not very nice stuff online, every single person I talked to in real life, whether it was at the Tim Hortons or on the C train or walking down the street, whatever side they came on, had thoughtful questions that were rooted in a real love for the city and what we're trying to do together in this city. So where do we go from here? Clearly, we've started a great conversation, the kind of civic engagement that I love. How do we continue that conversation in really thinking about what it's going to take to move this city forward? When I opened that new public library last week, I said that in this city, we are allergic to small dreams. And I think we continue to be allergic to small dreams. And starting tomorrow, when we release our budget, and every day beyond that, we will continue to work on this vision of this city, a great place to make a living, a great place to make a life. And we will continue to work together on how to move that vision forward. So with that, let me say thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to all the Calgarians who voted in huge numbers. It's a big deal. Thank you to Laura Kennedy and her team who put on a flawless election and did such a great job doing it. And thank you to the people on all sides who care about this city. We'll go to questions. Oui. Je suis un peu triste, c'est vrai, parce que j'espérais qu'il y aura un oui ce soir.
Mayor Naheed Nenshi now speaking in French for a second, just reiterating his disappointment, as he said, but he's also excited about the opportunity to keep the conversation going because he says he doesn't think that it was as split as some people would have you believe. He thinks that it was a chance to continue the conversation. We continue listening to Mayor Naheed Nenshi now.
And for me, that means that I ultimately take my direction from the citizens. So on Monday at City Council, we will have a little debate, which I anticipate will end in a vote to suspend this.
Do we live in the same city that was here in '88, or that can do the world capital of volunteerism, those attributes that Bidco touted throughout the campaign?
Let's remember that in the dying days of this campaign, 5,000 Calgarians signed up to volunteer for something that wasn't even going to happen for 8 years from now. I really reject the rhetoric on both sides that says this is about whether we're a can-do or a can't-do city. Because of course we're a can-do city, and we may disagree on which projects are going to take us there. And clearly the citizens tonight thought this wasn't the right project at this time. But does that mean that we're going to sit on our laurels? Does that mean we're going to sit back and hope that everything gets better? Of course not. You know, you look at that library we built, and you think back to those people in 1908 who built that city hall. That incredible city hall was not built for a town of 20,000 people. The citizens of 1908 were thinking about the city they wanted to build. And that's what we'll continue to do, and we'll do it every day. It won't be this path, but there are so many other paths. I often say that our dreams in Calgary are only limited by the endless prairie sky. And starting tomorrow, under that big blue sky, we find a new path.
Couple more questions?
Many people were concerned about the lack of transparency with Bidco because it's not subject to FOIP. Now that this looks like it's going to be suspended, as you said, Monday, will Calgarians get a clearer sense of how the tax dollars were spent?
I can't imagine why not, but of course, as you know, because we've had this conversation many times, I would challenge the assertion of your statement. Yet again, GamesBids.com this week said that this is the most transparent and accessible bid ever
Right, but I'm
in
talking
Olympic
specifically
history.
about how the money was spent. We don't know how the money was spent. That's what specifically.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I can't see why not.
Can you or your council learn anything from those opinions expressed by the no side throughout this campaign?
You know, I think that when we set aside the mean stuff, and there was some mean stuff, mostly online, but when we really think about what were people concerned about, I think it's really important for us to, over the weeks and months to come, to really start peeling that onion and better understand how we got here and what was at the root of people's concerns. And in addition, what is at the root of people's hopes and dreams for the city and how we move forward?
All right, we've been listening to live coverage. Mayor Naheed Nenshi reacting to the no vote, obviously disappointed, trying to put a brave face on in the hope that Calgary can move forward. It'll be interesting to see the reaction in the coming days. We are back with more reaction and analysis. Rob Breakenridge, Joe McFarland, stay with us.
This is Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. Now, here is Rob Breakenridge and Joe McFarland on 770 CHQR.
Well, Calgarians have spoken. 56, just over 56% for the no side in this plebiscite today. And so it would appear to all be over, at least in terms of 2026. Whether there's an appetite for something down the road, well, maybe that's a conversation that will occur. But I guess, Joe, we're getting more reaction to these results here.
Yeah, bid co-chair Mary Moran addressing the media just a short time ago.
Where did things go wrong?
Yeah, I'm not going to assess it tonight. I think, now tonight's a night to thank everybody who contributed to this. A lot of effort went into this, and we didn't have an easy road, but this team never gave up at Calgary 2026 and or the Yes Group. So it's a time to thank them.
Did voters have enough time, in your eyes, the 13 days to really get educated enough?
Yeah, we gave a very thorough budget on September the 11th, and we changed 6 numbers. I think it was complicated and unnecessarily complicated, and that's very unfortunate.
A lot of blame is being thrown towards City Council. How much of a hindrance were they in handling this file?
Yeah, I have to work with City Council every day and have for the last 9 years, and getting governments aligned is always a big challenge, and I wish we did it sooner, but, we did the best we could with what we were dealt, so.
Mary, were you surprised by the result?
Yeah, no problem. What's the biggest challenge in selling this bid to the public? Well, look, we always knew we had a short runway, but everybody knows that we came out with a pretty solid budget on September 11th, and we said a couple of numbers would change, and they did, and it's just unfortunate it was complicated.
What are your emotions tonight after working on this?
I still really believe in this city and believe that, we need to embrace this energy that we had during this discussion and debate about Calgary and move forward. And we need to do it in a more united fashion. And I think we can do that and build a better Calgary together. We've got a tough road still.
Tapping into your background in economic development, Amazon didn't come here. Alberta can't get a pipeline built. The Olympics are not coming here. What is a project that the city can pursue that is unifying and attracts investment now?
Yeah, there isn't a silver bullet for Calgary right now, and I think, we still have a strong energy industry. We've got some headwinds against us. I'm not giving up on the energy industry, but I think we have to evolve the economy and evolve our talent pool, and we need to be more focused on that, and we need investment into marketing that effort, both from a Calgary economic development, a tourism perspective, and, that would be my expectations for the future.
Bid co-chair Mary Moran on today's no vote. Again, 56.4% saying no, the rest saying yes. Turnout around 40%.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there seemed to be a narrative building that if it was going to be high voter turnout, that might bode well for the yes side, that there were maybe still people on the fence, undecideds, and, what would it take to motivate them to get out and vote? So, it kind of drives home that message that not only did people turn out in fairly substantial numbers, but that the vote was very definitive for the no side. So Calgarians have spoken, and I think that's the takeaway here this evening, is that it's a pretty definitive message from Calgary voters. This isn't what they want, or at least it's not what they want right now. So where do we go from here? And I think that's going to be the conversation that needs to take place. As Mary Moran said, look, there is no silver bullet here. There is no magic solution. There's no magic wand we can wave that's going to turn Calgary's fortunes around overnight. But, clearly we've got a ways to go as a city.
But it is a conversation that will continue in the days and weeks ahead. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more. This is Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. He's Rob Breakenridge. I'm Joe McFarland. We'll be back soon.
Now have your say on the radio. This is Calgary Olympic Vote, Decision 2026, hosted by Rob Breakenridge and Joe McFarland on 770 CHQR.
It may not have been as big as some were projecting the difference to be. Some went so bold as to say it better be 70% or more, either for or against, or I'm moving out of town. I doubt that's going to happen. That being said, it's still a pretty resounding 56.4% saying no to an Olympic bid for the 2026 Games. Where do we go from here? Who's going to have to answer some tough questions? A lot to digest still in the days and weeks ahead as we kind of put a final touch on saying no, as council still has to officially vote to kill the deal altogether. But a lot of different people weighing in tonight, Rob.
Well, and what I hope coming out of this, and look, either way, there were going to be a lot of disappointed people with the results. Mm-hmm. Look, everybody who voted today, it cares about this city, right? And neither side had a monopoly on wanting what's best for Calgary, just different visions and different views on what Calgary needs, where Calgary needs to go. And you're going to run into that in any city. You're never going to have 100% of a city, unified around a certain idea. So this, in that sense, was no different. There were very differing views on the value of this, the risks of this, the costs, the benefits, etc. But people who voted today voted because they care about the future of this city. And I hope that people keep that in mind in the coming days as we just kind of digest all of this.
Agreed. And to add beyond that is I don't think it adds anything to the discussion by trying to name call through the process. And a couple of different commenters through Twitter, I know today, and even in phone calls saying, you've been duped if you're voting yes. Well, why is it that you're being duped? There seems to be this weird thought that, hey, I'm more Calgarian because I'm voting no, or I'm more Calgarian because I voted yes. I don't think so. I think everybody had a right to their opinion and belief of where the city should be going in the years ahead. And the majority of Calgarians tonight spoke saying the Olympics isn't the right step. So now we get to take a step back and figure out what is the next step to make sure that we are progressing as a city.
A lot of action on social media. And, that's been a unique aspect of this is obviously the world's changed since 1988, going through this plebiscite, the conversation on social media. Adam Toy joins us in studio. Adam, what have you been seeing?
Where are you going to celebrate the giving season? Skiing on the slopes? Basking on the beaches? Or hunkering down at home by the tree? Well, wherever you are, there's no better way to say Merry Christmas than with custom cards, calendars, and photo gifts from Vistaprint. And right now, you can get 50% off all Christmas.
All right. Now we're going to get to the bottom of the button issue. Adam Toy, can we hear you? You're loud and clear. Perfect.
Yes.
We knew it was going too smoothly.
So, Rob, you asked what I've been seeing today. We've been broadcasting this entire evening's broadcast live on Facebook. And it's been interesting to see all of the very polarizing sides and their opinions coming out. But one tweet that I wanted to lead in with from Twitter from Janice Voss says, close vote in Calgary, hoping in the coming weeks people can come together and decide what direction Calgary should move forward with. And there's been other comments on the Facebook Live feed as well that, we've seen the plebiscite, we've seen the results. Majority of Calgarians don't want to go ahead. What next? Are we going to allow this divisive yes-no to further divide the city, or are we going to move forward together? Mm-hmm. There was another comment here that from Glenn Peters on Facebook. I see this as a citywide vote about confidence in a mayor and a group of councillors who didn't have the respect for the public that pays their salaries. Lesson learned. First, learn what is important to most Calgarians. Then don't stay so sneaky about everything with so much out of the public sight. Probably speaking to all of those in-camera meetings that council likes to have.
Yeah, and to sidebar off that, Rob, is that something that this mayor and this council is going to have to take a step back on and reassess the situation? Because this, as much as it was a vote against the Olympics, was this a vote not necessarily against the mayor, but certainly a vote not in favor of the way the council's doing its business right now?
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. And I mean, anecdotally, we certainly heard that from listeners throughout this process was, I'd like to be a yes. I'd like to get there. I really don't like how this is being handled, or I really don't like that these kind of important issues are being discussed behind closed doors, or these massively redacted documents are being released. Remember, there was the whole business with the whistleblower, or the leaker, whatever you want to call him or her, and the whole bit of business about the bus barns. And then it seemed to be all about not how do we address this potential cost overrun. It was all about, well, all hands on deck. We must find and punish the leaker. And, that kind of embodied all of that.
Sound familiar? Which, again, it goes to that point, the hypocrisy of the quote-unquote left versus the quote-unquote right is, we're going to vilify one guy for saying we got to find the leaker, but in this realm, we're going to say, it's all well and good that we had leakers, right? So just an interesting sidebar on the whole conversation.
In terms of the political fallout, it was an interesting statement put out by UCP leader Jason Kenney. It says the people of Calgary have spoken today, indicated that they do not support a 2026 Winter Olympic bid. With today's vote, Calgarians told governments to focus on key priorities and to keep taxes down. Calgarians understand this and have decided to get our fiscal house in order before embarking on such a large and expensive undertaking. He goes on again to congratulate and thank Councillors Jeremy Farkas and Sean Chu for having led the fight on a plebiscite. So maybe the political takeaway is that Calgarians are in a bit of a foul mood. Calgarians want governments that are not going to be bandying the idea of spending billions of dollars on big projects, so they're going to be prudent. They're going to make smart fiscal decisions. At least I think Jason Kenney would like that to be the takeaway as we get set for a spring election campaign and a key battleground here in this city.
He's Rob Breakenridge. I'm Joe McFarland. You've been listening to Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. We'll be back with more in a moment.
Hi, I'm Aaliyah. Hi, I'm Sophia. And our grandpa says buying a new home in Vulcan is like getting a fully loaded, supersized meal.
Hi, I'm Grandpa, owner of Pristine Homes. For a limited time, we're offering single-family homes starting from the 370s. All homes are located on Vulcan's beautiful 18-hole golf course. Vulcan has it all: schools, recreation, shopping, even a hospital. Check it out for yourself.
Grandpa's website is
is Rob Breakenridge and Joe McFarland with 770 CHQR's radio special Calgary Olympic Vote, Decision 2026.
Well, as you can imagine, the Global News Hour at 11, jam-packed with coverage on the plebiscite results and the resounding no vote. We will be going live. We will simulcast the Global News Hour at 11 o'clock. So much more still to come on these plebiscite results, Joe.
And plenty of reactions still filtering in through the course of the evening. We've heard from Mayor Naheed Nenshi. We've heard from BIDCO Chair Mary Moran. We also heard from Jason Kenney just a short time ago via statement. We also just heard from Minister Ricardo Miranda just a short time ago in a written statement. Says, quote, "Today was a success because Calgarians were given the opportunity to have their say on whether to proceed with an Olympic bid. This decision was never an easy one. Calgarians were provided the information they needed to make an informed choice, and we respect their decision. We want to thank everyone involved in getting us to this date." Goes on to say, we'd also like to acknowledge the support of the federal government and the city of Calgary. Do we really have all the information we needed?
Well,
I use it as a rhetorical question, but at the same time, that seemed to be the big factor when you look at even some of the questions around whether Edmonton was going to be hosting hockey games. I mean, that was derailed days and even 10 days ago, and yet that was still a talking point for some on the no side.
Well, because, yeah, it had been out there for so long, but it is true. It was kind of a last minute, well, we've decided against that, and did that percolate all the way down? Were there other concerns? You know, it's interesting because the province, I think, was really the catalyst for there being this plebiscite in the first place. Obviously, that plebiscite was nearly voted down 10 days ago. But I wonder what would have happened had it not been, contingent on provincial funding for there to be a yes vote. Could this have been avoided? And, there are probably a lot of boosters who are going to wonder what could have been. That maybe if only we could have pushed past this stage and seen it all work out, and maybe the naysayers would have been brought around. But because the province insisted on a plebiscite, now this dream has died. I wonder if there are going to be any fingers pointed at that, or do we respect democracy? We're not always going to like the results when the people vote, but maybe the people ultimately should decide.
And I know there were some people who thought as well that the plebiscite took the pressure off City Hall and city councillors in particular and allowed them to shirk the responsibility off to the taxpayer or those who can vote. And the argument has been raised, in terms of the voter turnout for this is, hey, maybe we need a plebiscite question on all municipal elections. And I can't get behind that, to be honest, only because then you're trying to add on something that may not really need to be there, that kind of thing. But even beyond that is you really... For me, it was a matter of watching this council sort of go in and out, and where they confused the electorate even without really trying to, in a sense. And even with the process behind, okay, we don't stand behind the plebiscite anymore, but we need enough votes to go forward because of a technicality. Felt like that might have turned a few people off too.
Yeah, and we get back to what we talked about earlier, where, the closing days of the campaign, just, how overwhelming the message was from the yes side, and, to hear different athletes speaking out, different business leaders, the playing to the 1988 nostalgia, that in the end, it wasn't enough, that as much as Calgary is a winter sports city, and I would bet you that most people who voted no probably think that 1988 was a success, probably think that it was a good time, probably think that it left a legacy. But it wasn't enough of a selling point on doing it over again. So even a city that embraces a winter sport legacy is prepared to say, you know what, this still isn't the right fit. This isn't what Calgary needs right now. It isn't something we can afford right now.
One of the things that I was interested to hear from Adam on, and we might have to dive into this a little bit more during Calgary Today tomorrow, is what is the next step? What is the next big project that we need? I would argue the one that was missing from this entire conversation was getting the LRT to the airport. We need to figure out how we're going to make that happen, and sooner rather than later. How are we going to pay for it? And even beyond that is, how do we make the transit system more versatile? How do we get that Green Line finished? How do we get that Southwest BRT finished? How do we get some of these things that have been up in the air for a while? I'll go back to the field house. How do we get some of this stuff going in a timely manner, but also in a fiscally prudent manner?
Right. And what's going to get downtown going? I mean, ultimately, that is the biggest challenge confronting the city of Calgary, is how to revitalize the downtown core. You know, there's an argument that's been made that, well, you know, maybe an arena district, that could revitalize an area, but does that also pull resources away from downtown? So, you know, there's a lot of conversation to be had about what the city needs, where the city goes from here. But Calgarians have decided that we don't want the Olympics. That is the decision today. It was a very straightforward question, yes or no. 56.4% of voters said no.
A lot of questions still needing to be answered, but that will take us to the end of the special program, Calgary Olympic Vote Decision 2026. Rob, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting night, Joe, and I think, you know, that was one thing we expected going in, as you said earlier, to expect the unexpected, and it turned out to be a dramatic evening. The fallout, look, there was going to be fallout either way from an important decision like this, but there will be much more to be said in the coming days, and of course, we'll be all over it tomorrow. As we mentioned, we will go live at 11 o'clock to the Global News Hour at 11, so much more still to come on these plebiscite results here this evening. Thank you for spending some time with us this evening as we bring you these results live. My name is Rob Breakenridge, along with Joe McFarland. Have a great night.
I found